Welcome back, Officers Republic. Their course Honorable Police Chief APGAINS, another episode of APGAINS at night. It's just APGAINS, but it is harder to see me. And to address the comments from last APGAINS at night, yes, I am doing skincare. This is not semen on my face, and fuck you, whoever was talking about my unibrow. It has been plucked. All right, we're talking about Padme. Now, Padme, back in ye olden days, when my channel was first starting to blow up, was one of the best farms that you could possibly do. We had innovated a new and exciting way to get her earlier than expected and with lower gear than expected in a day when min-maxing GP was incredibly important. And I'd like to think that many, many tens of thousands of people, well, I guess there's only 2 tens of thousands of people, because you guys don't want to subscribe and get me to 30,000 subscribers because you guys hate me. But many, many thousands of people have attested to the first video they ever saw of me was the OG Padme guide, lowest gear world record, whole shebang-a-bang. So thank you guys who have been around for that long. Essentially, the strategy is just Nuke Gunray lead with Jango. Neither of them need to be anything above gear 10. Usually you take Jango to gear 11, and then you have like gear 8 or gear 7 Geonosians. They've all been bumped up a gear level and a half since I did the event, but haven't really been touched since because the Geonosians suck. But like the Geonosians, Padme persists almost entirely on STDs. Let me pull up our squads here so we can talk more about this Padme squad and why there might still be much more. Thank you for selling me stuff. CG, wow, $64. What the heck? Oh my goodness. Don't fall for that stuff. But let's talk about why there might be more value in the Padme squad than a lot of people are giving her credit for. Okay, so the general Padme squad in the very early game is going to consist of something like this. Padme with Jedi Knight Anakin, Ahsoka, GK, and Mace Windu. Probably Mace Windu, he got a rework the last year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. This used to be like, I don't know, Cody or, Qui-Gon, like just something random, right? Before Qui-Gon and Mace both got fantastic reworks and became great characters. But this is something like the Padme is going to look like. And anyone who's over 2 million GP might look at this and be like, APGAINS doesn't really persist, doesn't really hold value long term. I'm all about farming things that hold value long term. And to that, this is, I guess, just the squad that you use to unlock Padme. To that, I say, I mean, even if all 3 of Anakin, GK, and Windu are off doing other things, these two right here with Qui-Gon and this with JMK in the future, I mean, Padme with leftovers plus Gideon will kick the fuck out of a lot of stuff. And since this is back to basics, where we're talking about sub 2 million GP, very early game players and how they can find viability, I mean, this is going to get you a long way. Sub 2 million GP. Like, don't get it twisted. Like, you can extract value out of this team massively while you build up to the point where you're entering into the mid game, and maybe you bring in a JMK and a Qui-Gon to kind of phase out a lot of the traditional Padme team. But even past, like, even to this day, I'm, almost 7 million GP. My opponents are 8 to 9 million GP. Like, I frequently find myself in need of a Padme Gideon, just straight 25 stacks of courage, kick, insta delete someone. I'll occasionally do random shit like dispel buffs on Magna Guard, maybe stun Magna Guard with Cody or whatever, reduce turn meter all the way to 100%. Padme goes in, one-shot kicks Grievous when I have nothing. Like, the amount of utility that you can still get from Padme one-shotting people is always going to be there. Now, since this is back to basics, what do you generally use your Padme for? Well, in the early GACs, obviously we talked about in the last Back to Basics about the Bounty Hunter team, a lot of early GACs are about super high banner efficiency on offense, and we generally have, a couple of teams that can manage that. You can do that with a Darth Vader solo, you can do that with a Bosk lead or Bosk snipe team, you can do that with Jedi Knight Revan, you can do that with CLS. These are teams where you can get undersized recovery to get max banners. You could do that with undergeared Imperial Troopers if you have a strong Piet and Dark Trooper with good enough speed. There are plenty of offensive teams that are going to get you that. Now, Padme does have the potential to be fast enough to pop her courage or her protection over time with her healing ability, and then maybe they don't do enough damage to break through that, but oftentimes something's going to happen and there isn't really protection recovery on this team, so you're going to find yourself in a position where you're not going to have the opportunity to get those maximum banners. And that's why Padme has always been a decently strong to very strong, depending on your opponent, early game STD team. I actually forgot to explain what an STD team is. Well, we have Bugs right here to perfectly explain an STD. Sometimes difficult. No, it doesn't stand for sexually transmitted disease because this is Galaxy of Heroes. This isn't your, freshman year health class that your football coach was secretly the teacher of, which was really weird for some reason. But no, STD means sometimes difficult. Teams where if your opponent is unprepared or you've pulled out counters already and they just aren't really equipped for the situation, this team can be incredibly annoying, nigh on impossible to beat. Padme stops teams that are attacking out of turn. It stops teams that, aren't really good at putting out debuffs or put out a lot of debuffs, but they're not controlling enough to the point where, Anakin can get a bonus turn and then Padme, and then, oh, boom, all those debuffs are turned to courage and now you're dead. Like, there are plenty of teams in the, pre-2 million, even in the mid-game, or if you don't have a Jedi Knight Revan or a Nihilus Traya team with a Thrawn, or you just don't have some of the weird early game counters that are going to kind of be able to take out this Padme team, it can be incredibly, incredibly, incredibly annoying on defense, simply by virtue of there's not a ton of ways to go about killing it unless you're much stronger. If there's a Padme team that's like all gear 8 and you have like a Relic 1 team or something like that, you're going to be able to take it out just simply by virtue of having way more stats. But I wouldn't really count that as a great success, if I'm being totally honest. And that being said, lower gear Padmes do have back wall viability in early GACs because, you can survive very well on just the synergy of the kit alone on the back wall when maybe your opponent's better teams have been exhausted. Now, this is a huge back to basics, always has to come with a huge caveat of money-based matchmaking will sometimes put you against an opponent whose every single team is relict and you're just kind of SOL. There isn't really any magic secret remedy to beat those players unless you're using the patented ship-only defense, which only applies in certain situations and requires very specific thing. And sometimes people go too quickly into it and then they, can't actually get the full clear. And so ship-only defenses don't work. It has to be constructed over 1 to 2 to 3 years. You know what I'm saying? Like there's plenty of things there. So don't expect to go in at 1.5 million GP versus a 4.5 million GP opponent and wipe the floor with them with your lower gear Padme or any particular strategy like that. So for GACs where it's winnable and it's close and it's worth playing, low gear Padme back wall is going to provide great value, but also like you kind of want to relic them for P2 of gas. We haven't really talked about Padme kind of leads into gas, which is one of the better teams in the entire game, even to this day. But just generally speaking, like every character on the Padme team is good at relics. Padme's good at relics. Anakin has a great ship, one of the best ships in the game, great at relics. GK, one of the best capital ships in the game, is a requirement for a Galactic Legend and also is one of the best tanks in the game. Ahsoka has a ship that's not as used in the late game, but early and mid game you're going to get great viability out of it. Plus, you can, you end up using her own JMK, so it's nice to have a relic for Datacrons. Same thing with Mace Windu. I mean, he's strong, he has viability, he likes to fuck up Malgus if you have him on a Jedi Knight Revan team. Just all around, these characters are very valuable at relics, and if any of these characters are lacking Zetas or relics and you kind of feel guilty about applying them, I would say don't really feel guilty about applying them. This team is fantastic. And especially for those early game players, you're going to get exceptional early, mid, and late game value out of all of these characters, and especially the Padme leadership ability. So thank you guys for watching. This has been an episode of Back to Basics. As always, I love you, and I'll see you later.